Why not? And the recording is in progress. So let me click OK on that. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the folks online for tuning in at home. My name is Nancy. I am an educator here at the Quabbin Visitor Center. Many of you know me. I've been here for quite a number of years and see a lot of familiar faces. So thank you. And for those of you who I don't recognize, welcome. Nice to see you. And this is part of our, the last actually of our winter series that we do every year for the slow months of January and February. On Sunday afternoons, we like to have some sort of presentation here, historical or geology or some sort of science-based, some sort of interesting public presentation that somehow ties into the Quabbin, the history of the watershed. And so we usually do something a little bit different every week. And this year this year was a bear year for me. So I decided that it would be fun to learn some interesting things about our Neigh-BEARS. And if any of you remember our friend Baloo in the corner, we're gonna look for the bear necessities. Okay, hopefully some of you remember what that is. And the rest of you just think, oh, she's crazy, which is fair. So let's get started talking about these guys. So we all know that there are bear in Massachusetts, and most people even know that they are specifically black bear. The Latin name is Ursus americanus. And we know that they get into our birdseed and our trash and our chicken coops and our beehives, and that they're generally, in some people's minds, they're troublesome. But they also have really adorable cubs that even though it's incredibly dangerous, we still want to cuddle them. So we do know some things about bears, but how much do we really know about the largest land mammal, one of the largest land mammals in New England? And that is what this presentation is going to talk about. Just briefly, this is a list of some of the resources that I used for this presentation. If folks online want to take a screenshot and go to these sites for further information. If anyone in the room is interested, then later on I can go back and I can just pull this slide up if people want to get the information. These are just some of the sites that I used, but there is definitely a lot of information about bear online. And this program aims to be a lighthearted look at these beautiful, incredible creatures with some fun, interesting facts. This is not intended to be an in-depth discussion about bear behavior or bear management. That is an area that is well covered by Mass Wildlife. They have experts in the field. They have a specific black bear biologist. So if you have any questions or concerns about bear activity in your yard or approaching a bear or anything like that, this is not going to address those concerns. I strongly urge you to go to the Mass Wildlife website. If you just go on to mass.gov and put black bear in the search bar, you'll come up with a whole list of information as well as contact sources. So that's where you're going to go for that. Here, we are just going to look at some really cool things about bear, and we're going to break it down into several topics. Topic 1 is size and description. Topic 2, where do they live, their populations. Topic 3, their food and their daily requirements. Topic 4, hibernate, yes or no, because some people have a question about that. And lastly, we will look at a year in the life. So, start off with topic 1, the size and description, which might seem pretty obvious, big and black. However, black bears are not exclusively all black. And black bears actually come in more colors than any other North American mammal. They can be black, brown, cinnamon, blonde, blue-gray, or even white. These are called color phases or color morphs, color morph. And they are not unusual. So nearly all of the bears east of the Great Plains are black. Your traditional black bear with the sort of lighter muzzle and sometimes having a white blaze on their chest. In the western part of the country, though, there are more color variations, those color morphs or color phases. And that is not unusual. Between 5 and 25% of black bears in other parts of North America are not actually black. They're called black bears because when the European settlers first came over here, they settled on the East Coast, and that's what they saw was black bears. So that's where the name came from, because those are the bears they saw. They said, oh, they're black bears. And then that was the name that had already been established by the time they moved out west and started seeing different color morphs. Size. The black bear is the smallest of the North American bears. They average between 5 to 7 feet from tail to nose. So, roughly, tall human size. They're about 3 feet high at the shoulder when they're on all fours. And this chart has some very varied information. So bears are consistently inconsistent. There is so much variety within the species, within the ages. Males are bigger than females. Some data says that males are up to 70% larger than females, which is a huge gap. And of course, adults are larger than juveniles. But even within these weight ranges, so we have, the adult male weighing in at between 200 and 500 pounds. That is an average, and there certainly are bears that have been recorded at up to 900 pounds. So these numbers can vary considerably within the females as well. They can be up to 600 pounds. Juveniles don't tend to be that big, but they can if it's a juvenile male in his later years. And the cubs, the range on the cubs, 8 ounces to 70 pounds, because they're about 8 ounces when they're born. So that's what they are when they're born, but then as they get older, they're going to grow and get a little bit bigger. Their range for travel is, again, also larger with the males, because specifically during mating season and when they are bulking up for the winter, they are spreading far and wide to look for either mates for mating or for food. So males can range between 10 and 100 miles for their territory. Females are going to be much smaller. They tend to stick closer to home, between 2 and 12 miles. And the juveniles are sticking with their mom for the most part. So as much as they are physically able to travel, they will travel with their mom. But they do get to a certain point, especially when they're younger, where they will not be traveling with their mom, but she shoos them up a tree. And it's often referred to as a babysitter tree. And they will be hanging around up there by themselves while mom is off foraging. And she can be up to 2 miles away and will still come back for the bear. So this is just, fair notice. If you see a baby bear in a tree, mom is probably coming back for it. So just leave it alone. And then the big one to look at is calories per day. Between 5,000 and 20,000 calories per day is what they eat. And we're going to take a whole look at what that means in terms of, how much food that actually is and why they need that much food. But we're also going to take a closer look at cubs because they're adorable. So as I said, they weigh only about 8 to 12 ounces at birth. So these are baby cubs at birth, the far left picture. They are born toothless and blind and with just a very thin coat of hair. And then they continue to nurse and grow while they are in the dens with their mom. And by the time they emerge in the spring, they're about 5 to 10 pounds. So the second picture of the cute little bear trying to attack his brother is probably only about 5 to 10 pounds. You can see why the teddy bear was invented, because this is just what they look like. And about 6 months of age, they are between 30 and 60 pounds. And I do want to point out the two pictures on the end were photographed by renowned local photographer Anne Ely, who is with us today. So thank you, Anne. We do have several other photographs in the presentation that were courtesy of Anne. All right, so moving on to topic 2, where do they live and their population? Let's talk first about their preferred habitat versus their adopted or adapted habitat. Preferred means exactly that. It's what they prefer. It's the biologically appropriate living conditions set up by evolution. It is the conditions under which they would live given no external influence. So what does that look like? It looks like forests and woodlands with some open plains, heaths, big, blueberry fields, that sort of thing. They need big trees. Trees provide shelter in dens and also safety for cubs. Their main sources of food are roots, berries, insects, and plants. And they have no natural predators in Massachusetts other than humans. So this is what they are evolved to. This is what they prefer. The adapted/adopted column is what happens when there is not enough food and space in their preferred habitat. There is only so much room in any forest, and when populations exceed available space, migration happens. This is just nature. That's what's been happening since the beginning of creation. As bears run out of space in the forest, they have to travel for new space and food, which inevitably brings them into human-centric neighborhoods, because that's what's here. They don't fly, so they can't go from isolated woodland A to isolated woodland B without crossing directly through city C. So that's how they end up here. The problem is when they arrive in city C and find it extremely easy to survive there, mainly due to an abundance of food. And we look at this, the adapted column. So they will can hang out in neighborhoods. They will use sheds, empty building, and crawl spaces as dens. They have easy and abundant food sources: bird feeders, trash cans, compost piles, vegetable gardens. There's a whole list of things that they can use. And this is problematic, of course, because it encourages and reinforces habituation. And habituation is a term that is used to describe when a wild animal becomes habituated to or used to / comfortable with humans or in a human environment. And it's something that no one wants, but that does unfortunately happen in some situations. So we'll talk about the range, and the black bear range is Massachusetts. Massachusetts is bear country. This image of the photograph that says Massachusetts is bear country is from a PDF that you can download from mass.gov. So it's a whole little booklet of information about bear in Massachusetts specifically. The map on the top, the left side of it shows the historic range of the black bear, that is before European settlers, and that the area in green is where black bear historically lived. And then the second picture was from 1995. So it's a little outdated, but it shows the range that was at that time, which is obviously considerably less. And that's due, of course, to human encroachment and deforestation and things like that, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next slide. The lower picture shows the established bear range in Massachusetts, and this is the current map that is up on the mass.gov website. The blue shows where they are currently, and the orange shows where they are expanding into. And it is entirely possible that at some point they will be even as far down as the Cape and moving around down there. So some of the factors on population in Massachusetts: the population's plummeted after European settlers arrived due to hunting and loss of habitat. Throughout New England, between 70 to 99% of forests were cut down for agriculture and timber use. So that was a huge factor because, as we've already talked about, their preferred habitat is woodland. There was also indiscriminate hunting allowed in Massachusetts up until 1952, which meant anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place, for any reason could kill any bear that they saw ever. And it was just anything. And that did not stop until 1952. So prior to that, it was open season on bears, and that also contributed to the decline in their populations. In the 1970s, their population was estimated to be only 100 animals isolated in the Berkshires. But things changed a little bit. People started to become more conservation-minded, and increased conservation efforts coupled with dedicated research and monitoring projects between multiple state and private organizations over the last 40 years has led to a protection of the population, and now we've seen their expanded range. Now, there's an estimate of between 4,000 and 5,000 bears in Massachusetts. All right, food and daily requirements. This is where it gets interesting and also complicated, because bears are carnivores, but they're actually omnivores, but they actually eat mostly plants. So what the heck does that mean? Well, let me preface this by saying that I am not a scientist or a biologist, so this is the most basic explanation that I can give you as I understand it. So let's start with talking about some terms that we are all familiar with. Carnivore, omnivore, and herbivore, right? We remember those from 3rd grade. Carnivore is a meat eater. Omnivore eats plants and meat, and an herbivore eats just plants. So bears are classified as a carnivore, but 70 to 90% of their diet is plants. Why is that? It's because of the way the scientific system is laid out. The map of the label at the top shows the order, the classification, and all of that. And then there's a little bit of an explanation on the slide down at the bottom. And if you see under order Carnivora, it specifically has the criteria of 3 pairs of incisors on upper and lower jaws with large canine. What that means is that the order of carnivore is based on the skull and teeth structure. It's not based on their diet. So carnivore, omnivore, herbivore are just this whole separate other classification system that don't really mean anything when you're talking about the scientific data. So if we look a little further on the top label, where under the, it says niche, generalist omnivore, that refers to the ecological niche, which is the role or function of an animal within its ecosystem. The niche of the black bear, the generalist omnivore, means they can eat a variety of foods and thrive in diverse environments. Depending on the time of year and the food available, a black bear diet can be 70 to 90% plant-based. And just to confuse you a little bit further, in case anyone was wondering about that order Carnivora and where that falls into things, as you can see, order Carnivora here, that's that physical classification. I'm talking about the teeth and the skull structure. If you look down, you will see the order of primates, which is where humans are, even though humans are omnivores. And there is also moles and shrews, which fall into order Insectivora. And insects are meat. So Insectivora are meat eaters, they're carnivores, but they are not in the order of carnivore because it's a separate classification, because it's just really confusing. So, having said all that, I promise you that this is not the last time we will encounter confusing terminology today. And there will be a quiz at the end of the presentation, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so what do black bears actually eat? It varies by the seasonality, by the time of year, and by the availability, which of course has a lot to do with their location. The spring, food is scarce. They're emerging from their dens. There's not a lot out there. There's maybe spring grasses, dandelions, roots, overwintered carcasses, and skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage is a primary food source in the spring for bear. Yeah, exactly. No, they love it. And it definitely it helps them, to like clean out their systems. And um, in the summer, food starts to become more available. You've got richer grasses that are growing now, berries, insects, fish, insect larvae. So they're starting to get more variety in their diet. The fall, early fall especially, is really abundant. You've got your mast crops, your acorns, other nuts, and the berries. They also will eat from gut piles left behind by hunters, carcasses, things like that. Black bear anyway, are not hunters per se. They will occasionally go after a small animal, a small rodent, but they're more going to be scavengers. So they'd be more likely to eat a carcass than to chase down an animal. And I know that there's an exception for chicken coops, because that's just too easy. And then finally, in the winter, of course, there is very little food available. And so this is when most of the bears are primarily in their dens, and they're not eating too much. But the fall is the most important time, late summer and through the fall. This is when the bears have to eat that 20,000 calories a day. This is an extensive period that they have to go through to gain enough weight to survive through the winter. And this period is called hyperphagia. And hyperphagia is this period in all bears go through it. Even bears that don't hibernate will go through a period of hyperphagia, which means excessive eating and drinking. So what does this look like? What are the 20,000 calorie a day equivalents in nature? Well, a pound of acorn has about 2,100 calories. So in order to get 20,000 calories, bear is going to have to eat 672 acorns in one day. Or blueberries, a pound of blueberries has just 256 calories. So they're going to need to go through 78 pounds of blueberries. And a pound is about a pint that we get at the grocery store. So picture 78 pints of blueberries, and that's what they're eating in one day. Or 25,000 tent caterpillars, which, ew, gross. But for bears, they're delightful. And, they could get a 32 pounds of rainbow trout would provide them with that amount of calories if they live in an area where some fish is available. So as you can see, it takes a mammoth amount of food for these bears. And this is per day. This is not 20,000 calories for the week or for the month or for the season. This is per day. So when bears are in this hyperphagia state, they are foraging for food for up to 20 hours. Their entire life is looking for food. So you can see why it's a lot easier for them to just go grocery shopping in our backyards. The equivalent in some human foods, 20,000 calories is about 37 Big Macs, quarter pounders, which they could easily get at the dumpster behind McDonald's. Only 5 to 10 pounds of dry cat or dog food. So if you're feeding your dog or cat outside and you have a bag of dog food that's just sitting out there, that's a day's worth of food for a bear. And here's a really important one. 1 7-pound black oil sunflower feeder provides 18,000 calories. So that one feeder is going to feed your bear for an entire day, but only one day. So this is why they go for our feeders and for our, for our foods. It's just much easier for them to find it than it is to find 78 pounds of blueberries. And there's also apparently 86 packages of Reese's peanut butter cups is the equivalent of 20,000 calories per day. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that sounds like that, like an unreasonable amount. Maybe it's just me. So this is why you can see that it is it can be very easy for bear to use our food instead of their natural sources, which of course is very bad for them because as we can see, all of these foods, except for the black oil sunflower maybe, but all of them they're high in fat, they're high in, they're processed, high in sugar. They are not going to be healthy food sources for the animal. So if the animal is surviving off of these food sources, intrinsically, that animal is not going to be as healthy as it should be, which is going to affect its metabolism and its ability to survive through the winter, which is going to make it more hungry, which is going to make it need to go and find more food, and it's going to create a vicious cycle. So this is why the very best thing is to let them eat their natural food sources and not provide anything. So bears find food in some pretty incredible ways. First of all, they have an excellent sense of smell. Their smell is 2,100 times more sensitive than a human's. They can smell a mile away minimum. And a lot of data supports that black bear can smell up to 20 miles away. And their sense of smell is 7 times better than a bloodhound. They're commonly believed to have the keenest sense of smell in the animal kingdom. It's a toss-up between them and the elephant, but they have an incredible sense of smell. So when you're wondering how is it that they get into your cooler or your car, that's why. They also have excellent hearing. Their hearing is twice as acute as humans, and their eyesight is the equivalent of humans, but with better night vision. So overall, their senses are far more advanced than ours are. They are also incredibly smart. They have very large brains. They have the largest brain to body ratio of any carnivore and are considered to be one of the most intelligent land mammals in North America. They have a remarkable spatial memory, which means that they can remember food sources, navigation, seasonality over huge distances and for many years at a time. And they pass that knowledge on to their cubs, to their successive generations. And those cubs then remember it. Their intelligence is connected to their adaptability, to the fact that they live in diverse environments and eat such a diverse food sources. There are studies that show that it helps to connect with their high intelligence. And they also have been found to be able to count, use tools and touch screen computers, and they take selfies apparently. There's a couple of bear online who have found trail cameras who have taken selfies of themselves. So so bear are actually pretty impressive. And if Yogi is smarter than the average bear, then Yogi must be a genius. And lastly, they are incredibly dexterous. I think everyone has seen pictures of the bear climbing all these crazy contraptions. They are excellent climbers. They're born climbers, black bears specifically. As soon as the cubs emerge, they're able to climb. They have non-retractable claws that are incredibly sharp and curved, like cat's claws, so that helps them to climb. And it also it allows them to get into fine, detailed niches for excavation, like for insects and larvae, for digging roots, picking those berries. They can pick those tiny little blueberries because they're very dexterous with those sharp claws. And they can open screw top jars, door latches, and they can figure out puzzle boxes. So yeah, bear are pretty incredible. All right. Hibernation. Are black bears true hibernators? Yes or no? Well, it depends on your definition of true hibernator. So this is where we're going to get into some more confusing terminology because we have all of this that's up there. Okay, hibernation is dormancy, but not all dormancy is hibernation. There's hibernation versus true hibernation, obligate hibernation or facultative hibernation. And then there's dormancy, hibernation, torpor, rumination. Oh my, there's a lot. So we'll try to just break it down. Dormancy is the umbrella term. So everything falls under dormancy, and dormancy means a temporary state of reduced metabolic activity and suspended growth in living organisms. Hibernation, torpor, and brumination are all states or types of dormancy. So dormancy is here, hibernation, torpor, brumation are all next in line. The word hibernation has both a general definition and a very, very specific definition in terms of animal biology. The general dictionary definition of hibernate means to pass the winter in a torpid or resting state or to become inactive or dormant. So under that general definition of hibernation, yes, black bears qualify, but they are not true, in quotations, hibernators. True hibernation is characterized by a significant drop in metabolic rate, heart rate, and body temperature. Those three things are key. And the drop is extreme, up to 98% of the animal's normal range in some cases. The body temperature will drop to near ambient temperatures, so air temperature. So if it's 32 degrees out, their body temp, true hibernators can drop their body temperature to around that level. It is a state so extreme that only a handful of small animals qualify as true hibernators. And within that category, there are obligate hibernators, which hibernate based on the season, regardless of the environmental conditions, and facultative hibernators, who only enter that state under extreme hardship conditions, such as weather or lack of food. And also, just to confuse you further, all hibernators, whether they are true hibernators or not, wake up in the middle of the winter and do stuff. True hibernators will wake up periodically to drink water, get a snack from their stash, or go to the bathroom. Our little friend, the groundhog, who is a true hibernator, wakes up about a month early to go and scope out the dens of all of the female groundhog in his territory, just to check on them, make sure they're all still there. And then he goes back to his den and sleeps for the next month. So it's either very sweet or very stalkery, but it could be why groundhogs are associated with waking up in February. And just to round out our definitions, torpor refers to a state of deep sleep and metabolic reduction that is short. It can be hours, days, or weeks, but is nowhere near as extreme as true hibernation and can be roused from easily. This is more where bears fit in. So this is why some people argue that bears don't hibernate, but they instead go into torpor. So again, based on your definition of hibernate, either one is correct. Another animal that goes into torpor in winter is the skunk. That's why you don't see a lot of skunks around, but occasionally you do. And hummingbirds actually go into torpor every night. And just to finish out, lastly, is brumation, which is hibernation in reptiles and amphibians, which are cold-blooded. So the process is different, but the end result is still a long winter's sleep. So now we're going to talk about some of the really fascinating things that happen within the bear's body during this time period. So we'll start with the hyperphagia stage, which is when they're doing that eating, eating and drinking. They will spend up to 20 hours eating and drinking, and they have to drink excessive amounts of water to purge their system from excess waste and to get their body ready. There are hormonal changes that are starting to happen that increase their appetite and decrease their level of satiety, the level of, the chemical in your body that says stop eating, that shuts off for them. So they're eating constantly. And these are due to hormonal changes in the body that specifically happen during this time. And they need to purge their body of nitrogen and other wastes. So this is a very critical time for the bear. If the bear do not eat enough during this time period, they will not, there's a very good chance that they will not survive the winter. They will not be able to get through to the spring because in the spring, there's still not a lot of food. So they're looking at a good 6 months before there is plentiful food out there for them again. And so it can be really, really tough on them. Something else that happens during this time period is female bears who have mated that year, and mating period is May through July. Bears experience something that is called delayed implantation. So they'll mate with the male bear in the summer, and then that does not take until the bear is actually in their den hibernating in November. I actually have a description of it in here somewhere. Well, we'll get to it. But it's called blastocysts, which are created. And if the blastocysts are not implanted, then the bear will not become pregnant. If the female bear does not eat enough food during the stage of hyperphagia before she goes into her den, she will not become pregnant. Her body will resorb those blastocysts, and so the pregnancy will not take. This allows the female bear to more easily survive the winter if she does not have enough fat reserves, and it also prevents having cubs in a year of food scarcity. So let's say they've now entered dormancy, so they're in the dormancy phase. So that metabolic rate is considerably lower, down to 75% of what it is while they're awake. Body temperature drops by 10 to 12 degrees. Their heart rate goes from a waking average of 40 to 50 beats per minute down to 8 to 10. And their respiration is down to 1 breath every 15 to 45 seconds. This metabolic depression allows bears to conserve energy by minimizing the need for oxygen and reducing the production of waste products. Protein breakdown and recycling urea. Urea is a waste product of protein metabolism. Bears are able to transfer that back into amino acids, which can then be used to build and maintain muscle while they are in dormancy. So this is something that humans simply cannot do. So if humans are not actively building muscle, if they are just laying around, they're going to lose it. They're going to lose strength. They're going to lose protein. Bears don't have that issue, even if they are asleep for 6 months. They also suppress osteoclasts, which are cells that break down bone. So bears suppress the activity of these cells during hibernation, preventing significant bone loss. So if you just think about if you've ever been laid up for a while, or even if you've just had a cast on a limb, the lack of use, it has a hugely detrimental effect on your body, on your muscles and your bones, and on your ability to move. And bears don't have that. They don't have that problem. It's pretty amazing. These processes are being studied for how they can be used to help humans. So it's a thing. Their brown fat that they have generates heat, and they also absorb water from the fat. And from any urine that would have gone out of their body, they resorb that urine. So they do not urinate or defecate while they are in their dens, while they are hibernating. For the small amount of fecal matter that would pass through their system, they resorb the water. And then that small amount of fecal matter turns into like a little plug. It's literally called a fecal plug. And that does exactly what you think it does. And that is there until they emerge from their den in the spring. So in terms of, so let's say they've gone through the winter and now they are waking up. Like I said earlier, all hibernators rouse at some point during dormancy. Bears are no different. When the cubs are born, so the cubs are born, if the mother has enough fat reserves and the blastocysts implant in her system, 8 weeks later is when she will have her cubs. And there'll be about 1 to 6 is average litter size. Usually they have about 2 to 3. And they are born live in the den, and mom will wake up and she will take care of them and clean them and nurse them. And then she'll go back to sleep and they'll keep nursing, and they'll grow and play and be cute little bears. But they're not knocked out for the next 3 months. They're active and awake. And they are, doing everything that they need to do. And then when they do finally emerge, it takes them a while to get awake. So they come out of their dens in around April, but they're still groggy. Their metabolic systems are still slowly building back up. So it's not like they come out of their den and they're ready to go. They get out of the den and they're like, it's like when you wake up and you're outside and you look outside and it's a snowstorm and you're like, I'm going to go back to bed. That's pretty much what they do. They're like, not yet. All right. So now we're going to look at all this a little bit more closely. We're going to just look at a year in the life of the bear. So January and February, cubs are born. They weigh less than a pound. They're blind, toothless, and covered in a very fine fur. Their eyes are blue at birth, and then they turn brown during their first year. The mama bear milk has a extremely high 20 to 25% fat content, which is much higher than human milk or cow's milk. And that is what they need in order for them to grow that rapidly while they're in the den. It's also why mama needs to have a sufficient weight on her, because the milk that she's providing is so highly nutritious. She's got to be able to support that in her own body. So that's what's going on in the cub's life. Non-pregnant females or males, they're just doing their thing. They're sleeping. They might wake up if water gets in the den, or if there's like a big noise that scares them or something. But generally, everyone's taking their nap time during then. March and April, the cubs are getting bigger, they're growing, they're starting to move around more. This is when all black bears are starting to shift their stages of waking and sleep. They're starting to feel those fluctuations of the outdoors, the warming outside temperatures. Depending on the weather conditions and the locations, the bears will start to emerge, usually around mid-April. Male bears emerge first, and then females. And lastly, females with newborn cubs. They're the last ones to come out. May and June is when they are finally starting to build some weight back up. They're getting better diets, better foods out there. Mama still has to have enough food for herself and her cubs, who are still nursing. So she is still feeding herself and her babies. So this is where, she's going to have to be traveling quite a bit to find the food. Those babysitter trees that I mentioned earlier, they're often white pines. And what mama bear will do is she'll build a bed underneath it. And that sort of becomes their like outside den, their summer den. And then the cubs will know that that's their tree, and they go up and down. And that's where she will always come back to find them. Juveniles in their second year. So cubs are born in January, and they stay with their mom through an entire year, and then they stay the second January through this time period. So until they're about 18 months of age. At that point, they are abruptly driven off when their mom is ready to mate again. And it can be just a matter of days. Mom can all of a sudden come into heat and be like, all right, you're gone, out of here. I don't care if we were like a happy family 2 days ago, you're gone. And the female offspring will be allowed to share the mother's territory, but the males will be driven off completely and have to find their own territory. So it's pretty hard for a male bear, especially in areas that have a high bear population. Fights for territory and breeding rights are common causes of bear mortality. So that's definitely something that they have to contend with. July and August, food sources are becoming more abundant, especially the berries, This is allowing the bears to really bounce back from their winter and spring weight loss. And when they emerge from the dens, they can have lost between 15 and 40% of their weight from the previous year. So it takes them a while to build this back up. Bears are roaming for miles, trying to find food and starting to scavenge for resources. And this is when you'll see them traveling far and wide. September and October, we have our hyperphagia stage. The cubs are eating mostly solid foods, but they can still be nursing. But this time period, everyone's got to just chow down and eat as much as possible and really start to build up those fat reserves for the winter. Temperatures, locations, and food availability will affect when bears finally settle in for the winter. In November and December, most bears are denned up by November in colder regions. They've prepared the dens with insulating beds of leaves, grasses, and fur to protect them from the cold, wet ground. And this year's cubs will spend their second winter with mom. So by this time, most bears are in winter dormancy. This is also when they are healing. Their bodies have a remarkable ability to heal during this time. So any injuries that they received over the previous year, even something as simple as the calloused foot pads on their paws from walking around all year, are completely reshed and renewed by the time they wake up. So they go to bed with rough feet and they wake up having had a pedicure. It's great. Temperature and food availability do profoundly affect the bear's winter activity. And in some southern regions, they may not den up at all. And bears that have not built up enough fat reserves may still be searching for food. Females that do not have enough fat reserves will not become pregnant. There is definitely an effect on bear denning and activity with climate change and with warming temperatures and things like that. So it is also, just in general, like the last few years, we've had really warm winters. So the bears, may not have been asleep that whole time. This year, they're probably still sleeping. But if there's a really deep warm spell in the middle of January, they could easily wake up and start roaming around. So this is a general year in the life of our black bear friends. And now we're going to talk about one specific bear. And this is a bear that was here at the Quabbin. On September 8th of last year, 2025, a visitor came into the visitor center and told us that the previous month, she had come across a full bear skeleton off one of the trails in Quabbin Park. And she thought we'd like to know about it, which of course we did. She had gone to Florida after she originally found the bear and had just come back from Florida, so was just telling us then. She hadn't been back to see whether or not it was still there. But she gave us the general location that she had found it in. And so, of course, we were like, okay, well, we'll go look for a bear. So we knew that the bear could not possibly be on the trail because a bear is not going to die on the middle of a trail in a huge, traffic area with lots of people walking by. And also, if a bear did die on the trail, we would have heard about it well before it became a skeleton. So we knew it had to be somewhere off the trail. And she did give us a general idea. So as long as no other visitors or hikers had found it and absconded with it, I decided, I was like, all right, I'm going to find the bear. So I grabbed an empty backpack and I went out looking for a bear. Now, I am not a novice hiker. I work here. I'm used to being outdoors. And the woman had given us a good indication of where the bear was. So I went out, I started at one end of the trail and I headed all the way to the other end of the trail and I did not see anything unusual. And as I was walking, I wasn't keeping my eye on the trail. I was keeping my eye off to where it could potentially be. So I get down to one end of the trail and I'm like, all right, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to go back. But instead of going back on the trail, I went back a few feet in off the trail, sort of bushwhacking, which is how we do like deer transects and other surveys that we do when we're looking for animals. So you walk lines that overlap visually, and then they're just a few feet distance, so you kind of make a grid. So that was my approach. And I got as far as I could, and then the brush started to get too thick, and I physically couldn't get through it. So I had to get back onto the trail. And I'm on the trail, and I'm thinking, wow, am I just really bad at this? Like, I thought that here's me thinking I'm this, like an elf, like Lord of the Rings. I'm like out there, part of the woods, part of the connection. And I'm thinking, wow, I am a really bad elf if I cannot find this bear. And the minute that thought went through my head, something caught my eye. And it was just a slight deviation in the trail that you couldn't see coming from the other direction. You could only see it coming from this direction. So I followed it, and 30 feet in, there it was. And I found the bear. And I was pretty amazed, because if you didn't know it was there, you would not have been able to find it. I don't know how this one found it. And I also don't know how other hikers didn't smell it while it was decomposing, because it was just a few feet off the trail. But it was pretty exciting that we did finally find the bear, that I finally found the bear. I was proud of myself. And so when I got there, I decided, all right, I'm going to like CSI this, and I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to try to do all this, fancy stuff. I don't know how to do any fancy stuff. I was just snapping pictures with my phone. But then I got on my hands and knees crawling around, and I picked up every little piece that I could find that I thought was a bone. And as you can see from the photographs, it was very, very much intact. The skull was about 5 feet away from the remainder of the body, but the rest of the body was there, except for the hind legs. And so I was able to gather up all the pieces of the bear. I said a prayer and had a moment of silence for the bear before I then brought him back here. And then came phase 2 of the projects, which was trying to build the bear, trying to rebuild the bear. And interestingly enough, there is someone online. He's called the Bone Man, and his name is Lee Post. This is his job. Is he works for museums and schools, and he builds skeletons. And he has books on how to build these skeletons. So I ordered the Building Bare Bones book from him, and I started identifying and putting together the bones, and doing the best I could. And construction is not my strong suit. And I fully admit that I can't even build Legos without the instructions. So this was quite challenging. And those of you who are in the visitor center will be able to see the end results, because I have the bear over on the table on the side. And after the presentation, we can do a little show and tell of Brother Bear. I did in my research what I was able to uncover. I believe, and if anyone is an expert on bear skulls, feel free to correct me. I believe that the bear is a 2 to 4 year old male and had died 6 months to a year prior to when the bones were found. So that's what I'm going with, that this was a young male. And
any idea how?
No, so it's no idea how. There doesn't seem to be any indication. I mean, there was no flesh left, so I couldn't see any like wounds or injuries. Again, I'm not forensic, so I don't know. But if he was a young bear, he could have gotten into a fight with another bear for territory. We just don't know, unfortunately. But the bear is here. We have him, and we will get to meet him in just a few minutes. But first of all, I told you there was going to be a quiz. Okay. I will take questions in just a moment. So there's just a few questions on the quiz. So, true or false? A bear consumes the most calories when it emerges from its den in the spring. Correct. False. It consumes its most calories in the fall. I also want to point out that last photograph, this photograph, and the next photograph are all from Anne Ely. So she is our photographer extraordinaire. And these are her bears. All right, so true or false? Bears do not defecate in their dens during winter dormancy. That is true. Good job, you folks are paying attention. Bears have large brains and are one of the most intelligent mammals in North America. It's true. All right, a little more challenging. Which of the following is not a recognized color phase of black bears? Oh, you guys are getting pretty good at this. You actually did pay attention. I love it. 20,000 calories are the equivalent of how many pounds of blueberries? Got it. The scientific name of the black bear is. Right. You got it. All right. Bonus question. This is the tricky one, but you guys seem to be pretty good at it. Period of excessive eating bears go through before winter is called. Yes, hyperphagia. Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes this part of the presentation. I will take questions now. I'll start with questions from the audience in-house, and then if we have any Zoom questions, I will take those. And then after questions, we can go and look at Brother Bear. Yes.
The pictures. The picture, the blog group, more or less, some of them were sequentially oriented. Did you just pick them all up and put them on the backpack?
No. So the question for the Zoom folks question is whether or not I just picked up all the bones and threw them in my backpack, because the photographs, they were well laid out. No, I was very careful to make sure that like when I took in the vertebrae, I strung it up piece by piece. I sectioned out